As an app manager, you need to have that bird's eye view of what your team is digging into. Where are the friction points?
It's not the business's job or the product team's job to understand the long-term business applications of technology decisions. That is your job. Understand the app stuff and be able to communicate it with the business and really sort of say, no, we're not going to do this. I'm accountable for this thing being healthy. And if we just keep doing what we're doing, it won't be healthy and you'll blame me. And you know what? They'll be right because you let it get to that point.
Guys, I know this is going to sound like a jerk thing to ask. I don't mean it that way, I promise. But why is everything taking so long? Asking that question over and over again builds that I'm going to go work on your behalf to get you time to clean this up. But I need you to be honest with me to say, why is everything taking so long?
We're here for another episode of Tech Council by DevGrid. So this is exciting. Today, we're going to talk about something interesting, right?
Well, they're all interesting. You're going to say, are you saying that the rest of them aren't?
Well, I mean, it's interesting today, right? Like the dirty little secret of a lot of these conversations is obviously we're dealing with things either in our own company or with our customers that help us flush out some of these topics in these conversations. So the main thing we wanted to talk about today was, as you're that app manager or that technology leader, how do you balance velocity, shipping new features against tech debt and or specifically reliability? How do you do that? And what are some of those techniques and strategies for managing that both within the team and also with your partners and business, et cetera?
And there's a lot of ways that people have done that. I've seen a lot of approaches. So this should be, like you said, interesting.
Exactly. Well, so let's talk about it, right? Like what are some of the strategies that you've seen people approach? I think, we can just start to enumerate those and talk through them.
Yeah, this is something that has a pretty recent hit for me because that's the kind of one of the roles that I had recently left. It was not just one or two apps, but I had a pretty decent sized space when I was done with it. But I've seen a lot of different perspectives of this, and I can't say there's one size fits all for any of these. It's just what works right now and what works for your organization and what works for you. So this is hard. It's a hard thing to balance your tech debt versus your business. There's even a world where they are very intertwined with each other. The way I would typically look at something like this is, why are they so separate? That was one of my questions at first, is why is everything separate? Why do we have to have a tech debt strategy versus a business strategy? And what seemed to work well is the blending of the two together. And in having a open dialogue with the business, with the product team, and saying, hey, look, we're taking shortcuts for meeting your deadlines. That's fine. No big deal. But this stuff is going to creep up on us. And eventually it's just going to come to bite us where we just can't deliver. Okay, well, let's just do, a certain percentage is your tech debt, and you're going to prioritize each individual tech debt item, and we're going to put that all in a backlog, and we're going to prioritize it, and that's it. And that's what was tried for a while. That never works, because you always have to look at the percentage of the time and say, how much did we put in tech debt? How much did we put in your feature work? And so it caused a lot of confusion with the teams on saying, okay, well, what kind of story is this? Is it tech strategy? Is it feature work? Well, yes, it's all of them at times, because some of this tech strategy is to better support your capabilities, better supporting your features. So the blended approach was a little bit nuanced. It wasn't pure put everything in one bucket and pull from there and just say, okay, well, you're just going to trust us. That it's not quite like that. There's a little bit of a percentages in there, a little bit of what are we looking at, but where it worked for us is pure tech strategy. Are we looking at blue-green deployments? Well, that's clearly going to be a tech strategy. Is it a new sort of resiliency pattern? That's tech strategy. Okay, so those are the two buckets that we have as features and tech strategy. The one missing here is tech debt. Where it caused so much confusion is within the teams and within putting their work into the epics of, is this tech debt? Is this feature work? There was so many conversations about that and analysis, and is this or isn't this? And eventually just had to say, let's just pause for a second here. We have to look at this as far as, what are we trying to ship here? We're trying to ship this feature. Okay, well, it was sized at a certain level, sized at a medium, a large. There's going to be some tech debt in there, and that's what the team thinks is going to need to deliver this the right way. And there was a little bit of discomfort with that at first. There's a little bit of, how do I know you're not just stuffing anything in there? Like, we can have the conversation and we can look at things, but we're not going to run the analysis of how much percentage was tech debt. We're going to throw some things in there because we're going to look at more of an outcome-based approach. Part of delivering this feature is to have all of our security in line. That's table stakes. You can't move that. there's going to be some scans that we have to do. Table stakes, can't move that. And so where some teams would typically say that's tech debt, if we're going to move that, or that's tech. No, this is part of the technology strategy and the business strategy walking together as partners to deliver something.
So let me jump in there real quick. So I think what you're articulating is the sort of the evolution of a particular shop's journey through that. And I think the point that we can sort of extrapolate from that is, one, there's no one size fits all. And two, there's an evolution. What I think you said, you started with, okay, here's a budget.
Right. You get 25% of your capacity.
Yeah, whatever, right? Like here's a budget of a percentage of your capacity that you can then spend on effectively technology directed things, the maintenance stuff, the improvements that are not directly being asked for by the business, but should also have an indirect business positivity. Like it's not just like, oh, you get to rewrite from one framework to another for fun. Like there should be a legitimate thing, right? So like that's a very particular strategy. I mean, you said it doesn't work. I think I would say a little bit more nuanced.
It didn't work for this. It didn't work for this case. I'm not saying that doesn't work anywhere. It can very much work, but it didn't work for the environment that I was in.
I think what you went through is actually the right sort of maturity curve. That's a place to start. Okay, hey, we're going to carve out in our minds and in our Jira or whatever, a percentage, anywhere from 10 to 30%, depending on your organization probably, and how mature the space is and all those things, of time and effort from the engineering department, engineering teams to focus on the more technical stuff, not net new things. And then what you find out is like, hey, there's a lot of inefficiency in that approach. There's ambiguity. There's some resentment by the business, and obviously can be abused, and all these other things, right? What's interesting about what you described is instead of having very clear buckets of this is this and this is this, you started to just make it part of your BAU, right? So you started to add stuff into your BAU, which in many ways, the criticism of that would be that's actually less clear what's happening, right? Now, to your point, it's more organic and you're not wasting a bunch of time trying to figure out this story is tech debt versus not or whatever. It's more of you're doing what needs to be done and you're maintaining the health of the organization. I think that makes a ton of sense when you have a good, strong app manager there. And that app manager, you can just trust and look to the outcomes and you don't have to worry about how you got there. I worry about that in a larger context.
You have to have strong partners in those. We would call it the tripod. You've got your technology leader, you've got your product leader, you've got your business leader. And if we're aligned on the strategy of what are we putting into this, we got to do some cleanup. We can't let this cleanup go forever. They were okay with that because at the same time, there were technology items that we would bring up, say, hey, look, we want to do this, we want to do this thing, but we get it. We can't do it right now, but it's important. And here's why, and articulate, what the benefits are like. And so we would never really get much pushback for it because we were pushing back on their behalf and saying, we're not doing this because we know that there's so much that needs to be done. It built a lot of trust for that organic process to work. So reinforcing your point of you need to have not just a strong app manager, but you need to have strong relationships and strong partners with the rest of the organization to make sure that they know you're working on their behalf and making sure that you're taking care of what is important. That's the value that you're driving. And so with that comes trust the other way to say, hey, you're pushing for something new. Like, okay, well, they've been really good partners, so we're not going to push back on that. We're not going to say, we don't need to nitpick. We don't need to make sure that we're not nickel and diming them on this little 3-point story that's coming in because it's in our budget already. We already know. So if they throw something in there that's cleaning up some tests, it takes longer to fight on it than just to do that thing because it just works better the way we have it. And so that's what worked the best for us.
Yeah, what I would say, I agree with all that. I think the thing I would say on top of it is when you're the app manager, you don't want to be in a reactionary environment. With all this stuff that is quote unquote non-business work or non-functional would be another way to say it, right? Is often a lot of that stuff is mandated by the organization, but it's only mandated by the organization at a certain point of problematicness, right? Like you think about driving your car and you need to get an oil change. Like you're not going to lose your warranty if you don't change your oil, but at some point you will. Like it'll void your warranty if it's been like 10,000 miles or something like that. It's like the enterprise doesn't necessarily mandate that you test this way or you do this thing or you manage your vulnerabilities this way until a certain point when you've neglected it to such a degree that yes, now it's going to be mandated. So if you're in a situation where you've done it really healthily and you can organically have a sense for where things are, tracking the things that matter. It's a big part of what we do at DevGrid. So the good app managers can have a sense of where they're at using the data in the ecosystem and then keeping that under control, right? Like What fires are you going to let burn? And which ones do you have to put out? Because you should always look back. All these things should drive to business outcomes, right? Like things you mentioned blue, green, you mentioned other resiliency things. Those should be tied to business outcomes. They're not a product feature, but you could talk to your business partner and say, okay, hey, like, do you need to be up, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, or 99% or 99.9% of the time? Like what actually matters, right? And then you say, okay, well, if we're going to achieve that, we need to do these things. And then it becomes more of actually driving those technical aspects into the business. And when it's tech debt, it's the same thing. Tech debt is usually either one, it has a security issue to it, right? Like there's stuff is getting old and maybe the security vulnerability in a library needs to be updated or something like that. But the other piece is you're really trying to shave off friction in the way the code is written, right? And so it's like, how do we make this more efficient? If I spend 2 points here, it'll make us 5% more efficient. So we'll make up 20 points in the next month because of the speed or something like that.
And I think that point that you just made right there is putting the math in front of everyone. That's where I think a lot of app managers don't either know to do that or they don't have a strong enough partner in the organization to be receptive to that conversation. Because as soon as you say, hey, look, we're spending this amount of time with maintaining this old service, maintaining this old application, maintaining this old code, we're actually only half as effective as we could be. If we were to spend, to your point exactly, is that we spend the 2 weeks on this now, we're going to save a day a month. And then given a few months, we're going to be saving, we're actually ahead of the schedule now. But looking back from that is measuring it. As an app manager, you need to have that bird's eye view of what your team is digging into. Where are the friction points? What's slowing them down? Have the conversation of where are the problems? Like, I don't know exactly the code of why something takes so long. Now, that's kind of a hard question to ask. Why is everything taking so long? That's not the question to ask. I would actually come up and say, like, guys, I know this is going to sound like a jerk thing to ask. I don't mean it that way, I promise. But why is everything taking so long? I got a little laugh out of them for that. But asking that question over and over again builds that I'm going to go work on your behalf to get you time to clean this up. But I need you to be honest with me to say, why is everything taking so long? So that you can go work on their behalf and partner with the rest of the organization to get that time. And that's the hardest thing to do is to have those conversations and just to know, like, why? Like, it's because everybody is afraid to ask that. Why is everything taking so long? But once you build up that context with your team where they know that you're not asking to be a jerk, you're asking to help, it just happens organically. And then you get that constant feedback of, hey, if we did this, it'd save a day a month. Like, awesome. Be right back. Can we go fix that?
Yeah, it's standard continuous improvement stuff. Where are friction points? Are there things within our friction points that we can control? And then, yeah, to your point, finding a way to measure that after the fact to build you the credibility. So if you say to somebody, hey, I want to spend 10 points to save 2 points a month, that's an interesting conversation, right? Like you say, okay, so your payback period on that is 5 months. Is that something you can actually prove? It's going to be hard to prove probably, but you can look at it and then have that conversation. And if you're honest with your partners about it, be like, okay, this is our hypothesis. We believe we're going to improve approximately this much if we do this work. It's going to improve velocity in that regard. And then if people see, oh yeah, this thing that they don't, used to take 2 points now takes 1, great. Like they'll see that. And then you get a little more latitude to ask for bigger and bigger things. Mm-hmm. Like I've worked with app managers that got into really bad spots. Their portfolio is kind of in the dumpster fire category because of neglected tech debt. They let an app come in and just sit there for years and they would just bolt on top and bolt on top and bolt on top. And they didn't do kind of the regular maintenance you need to do, or they didn't do the work to break some of the things down that they should have broken down. And I remember getting into these heated conversations I think we've talked about before. Like the answer was always, well, the business won't let us. And this is a point I really want to make again in this context is it's not the business's job or the product team's job to understand the long-term business applications of technology decisions. That is your job. If you are not balancing those things, if you are not holding the line, you are doing the business a disservice. That's why they have that really intelligent, really knowledgeable role of this app manager to sit in the middle and to understand the app stuff and be able to communicate it with the business and really sort of say, no, we're not going to do this. I'm accountable. I'm accountable for this thing being healthy. And if we just keep doing what we're doing, then it won't be healthy and you'll blame me.
Right.
And you know what? They'll be right because you let it get to that point. Now, and that's a really hard thing to say. And I remember I had that conversation with someone they didn't appreciate that point of view very much. It's really the right way to think about it because ultimately that is the case. And honestly, that can get you in trouble, right? Like that might get you pulled off a project or might get you fired. It's not so much as like taking an ethical stand over something, but it is kind of like that because if you don't, it will eventually blow up in your face and it'll be your fault. They'll blame you fairly or unfairly, even if you have it in writing. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, we're going to not do this thing because of this. Like nobody cares when the time comes. Now, I mean, to your point, you can't just dig your heels in and be impossible and say, we're not going to build anything until we've refactored this to be perfect. Like that obviously doesn't work. You have to work through it, but you have to chip away. I like what you said, where it's like, hey, we're going to bake a little bit in here and a little bit in there. One of the challenges that I've always found with app managers that struggle to do this type of thing, they make the pills too hard to swallow. You get these big giant horse pills and you're split and you're like, it's, we need 2 months or we need a whole sprint to do this. It's like, it's a tough sell, man. Like you're not going to do anything for the business in that time frame. It's like, so you got to break things down as best you can. If you've got 100 apps that need to be upgraded, don't try to stop and do them all at once. Do them one at a time or two at a time or something like that. Make progress, build a repeatable pattern and build credibility over time. That type of stuff can be really, really useful instead of like the big giant poison pill. They're horse pills, but they're really poison pills because then the business is going to say yes.
Well, also, they let too many people into their shop too, because I remember a few conversations where we had sized a unit of work, right? It's a 40 points, for example. We gave them a delivery date. Okay, cool. You good with that? Yeah, we're good with that. Everybody's happy and moving on. And then we would put some of these technology, quote unquote, or tech debt type stories in there because it's like, hey, look, we're working on that thing. We're in there. It's pretty efficient for us to just fix that thing that we broke last time this go round. Cool. The product owner saw that and say, well, why is this in here? This doesn't belong in here. Why do you care? It's related. It's part of what we're delivering. It's going to make us better. We're still delivering on time. Why do you care? And so that's the thing where people are just afraid to have the conversations of, why do you care? We're still delivering on the agreed upon time. It's super efficient for us to do it now. We're going to do this because it's part of our strategy to make sure that we're safe, secure, and we're not shipping code that's not good for the customer. And so there's a lot of pushback because, well, no, it doesn't belong in there. Like it doesn't matter.
It's not valuable to them. They don't care, right? Which is fine. Which is part of their job. Like it's their job is not to care about that stuff. That's why you exist.
Right? Yeah, and I said, if we're delivering on time still, we're not pushing back our delivery date. Why do you care? Why does it matter to you? And they really couldn't answer that. And that's just, people are afraid to buck the trend a little bit of the product owner saying, this is what you need to have in here. And I'm not dumping on product owners. It's a hard role and it's a challenging thing. So I'm not trying to dump on them, but that's the constant friction point between an app manager and potentially a product owner that says, no, lock the scope into this. You're not allowed to put anything else in here, no matter what. That's the biggest part of what makes a up and coming app manager or a tech lead, team lead who wants to be an app manager, stopping them from being good at that role is to have the hard conversations, to take care of their applications in light of somebody telling you, no, this shouldn't be here.
Well, and doing it with tact.
Correct. Yeah, you're not going to be a jerk.
Sometimes you get engineers that are capable of having that conversation, but like there's a bunch of bodies on the floor afterwards, right? And so like doing that in a way where everybody walks away feeling good about the interaction and good about the decision. To your point, it's not that hard once you get good at it, but it is hard to get good at.
You got to be bad at it first. People have to respect you that you're going to stand up for what's right so that they don't just walk over you. Because I've seen app managers who would just get steamrolled by someone else and just their apps would be in shambles, but they would just get completely steamrolled by somebody who was taking control, taking charge and say, this is what we're doing. And they would just say, okay. It always ends up in failure.
It's not good. It's not good. And I mean, I think the technique you suggested is the right one. Just ask questions. Like, what is the problem? I don't think this is important. Why do we have this in here? And it's like, well, we have it in here for this reason. If we meet the deadline that we all agree to, what do you care that we do additional work? What's the issue there? Now, if they have a real issue, they'll say, well, we should pull this other stuff in then instead of adding more to this. If we have additional capacity, obviously you can have that conversation and continue to talk through it. Ultimately, you do have to be able to advocate for the work. You do have to be able to say, hey, we have to do this now or we have to do it later. If we do it later, the danger of something breaking in between now and then increases. There's a 1% chance or a 0.5% chance something's going to break and go wrong in production or whatever, right? And every day we're rolling dice a little bit. And so it's like after 100 days, there's 50% chance something bad's going to happen, right? So like every day that we continue to kick this can down the road, increases the likelihood that this actually blows up in our face. I mean, I think if you can articulate that and advocate for it, then it gets a lot easier. It gets a lot easier to say those things. What I've seen happen a lot is, to your point, is people that they either get run over, or because they don't know how to stand up for the stuff in a productive way and to make the advocate. The other problem is they're offended by the insinuation they should have to justify it at all. And then that is a very counterproductive thing, right? Because the problem is if you're offended by it, you're not going to do a good job of explaining yourself. And so the first thing I would say is like, hey, understand everything you're doing as an app manager for a technology shop is to provide a business capability for the company to succeed. So your job is to provide the business capability, not to write code. You need to understand that. In order for you to create value, you have to be able to understand that transaction and then look towards it for that rate. And if you can't articulate that, then it's not valuable. If it's not articulatable in a way that a business partner can wrap their heads around, it's too squishy for you to really chase time on it, I would say. I would argue. I don't know if you agree with that, if that's too direct.
No, I do. You know, that's where the failure comes in when somebody's trying to come up with a new piece of improvement to their app. If it doesn't pass the sniff test of, can I justify this? Is it going to be worthwhile? Then why are you even going with it at all whatsoever? A lot of people fail is that, oh, I want to do these things, but I can't justify it. Like, well, okay, well, no wonder why, because you can't see the value yourself, so it's not going to ever happen. That's hard. That's where I see most people, once they realize they can put some math together and do math to do this, their eyes open that like, oh, you kind of see the light bulb just pop in their head that it's math. Yes, you can math your way out of this stuff. It's just math. And that's simplifying it. It seems like a gross simplification of what's happening, but that's what it is. It's time, it's days, and you get the results. But then trying to justify, 60 points of additional work, that's hard. But if you can't justify that yourself, then don't even come to the table with it, because it's going to get shot down and you're going to look like a fool in the process.
Yeah. I mean, so what is a big thing, right? Like, so what? Why? If you don't do this, so what happens? And just being able to kind of scenarioize that and plan through it, and not taking it so personally. Your special genius sense of what's important is only so valuable. Like, it's important. Like, your instincts are good. I run a lot on instinct as a leader, and I've that is a thing. But the problem is you can't work with other people on instinct. You have to be able to articulate. Your instincts tell you where to look, but you can't just tell everyone, oh, trust my instincts. It doesn't work that way.
And your boss knows something that you don't as well. One person that we haven't pulled into this conversation yet is your leadership of what they see as important. Because if you're going to say like, hey boss, I can save us 60 points a year doing something that doesn't align to what their strategic vision is, you've missed the mark too, because you've got working off on the side and the side project that, okay, well, if I would have known you were working on that, I would have had you spend the 60 points somewhere else that I can use on this other team that they're also going to save 60 points. So now instead of 120 points, we've just saved 60, which great, it's still 60 points, but it could have been so much more had we had the conversation. So we got aligned on the strategy overall of how we can then repeat that pattern somewhere else.
Alignment's a big deal, right? Like, I used to run we call it Tech Council, actually. I used to run a cross-organizational forum. That's where we got our name from, actually. We stole it from that, which was fun. And the thing that would drive the leadership crazy was trying to get these people to align. To your point, you had these pockets of people doing cool and interesting stuff, but it was all just in their own little bubble. And I shouldn't say all, a large portion of it was very much in their own little bubble and very much for themselves and not in a repeatable way. I don't think it was intentional, but it was almost as though it was intentionally idiosyncratic to themselves so that it wouldn't be repeatable. I remember trying to pull teams together and trying to get them to share some information. And you could see these individuals like poison pill the process by throwing in something that was so specific to them to like break the model. I'm really glad you brought that up because, yeah, stay aligned to what the strategy is with the bosses. Like, if the boss is really focused on resiliency, for example, or maybe a cloud migration or a technology migration or getting out of a certain data center or whatever it is, like, understand what the top of the house goals are that are technology goals as well. We all do this as engineers, right? Like, we all create our own little special pet projects and our own little special pet passions about everything. And we're like, oh, I care about this one thing and I'm going to drive this one thing forward. I don't want to say don't do that because that's such a motivating force for positive change. But at the same time, like, you have to balance and make sure you're staying close enough to the mainline needs of the organization, the mainline thread. Like you don't want to go off 30 degrees off course. You can be 1 to 2 degrees off course and off the main line and sort of pull it one direction or another a little bit perhaps. But just like you want to stay so that if the bosses hear about what you're doing, they don't get a sense you're off and taking a right turn somewhere. Because then it makes it easier to get support. You come back, you say, okay, hey, we did this thing. Great. They reinforce that. And then maybe the whole company shifts more towards your thinking. But again, that deviation can't be too dramatic or else you won't be able to get people to buy in.
And that goes with the receiving end of it as well. If you're going to just kind of go into the receiving end of somebody coming up with something that doesn't align to your vision, well, that's okay too sometimes, because I think you said it of, you don't want to squash the motivation. You don't want to squash somebody from trying new things and trying to push their team to do better. So having a little bit of a tolerance for it, well, overall, this doesn't meet my strategy. So, however, let's talk about that for a second and say this doesn't, but okay, I want to hear more about why you're so passionate about this. Why is this coming in? So maybe I need to change my perspective of, well, we should only look at resilience. We shouldn't look at your thing. Why are we talking about this? And, we're clearly on the same page that resiliency is the most important thing. Why is this coming up now? Why are you so passionate about it? And have the conversation so you're not just shooting ideas down.
It's super important. It's something I've struggled with because I get impatient when people are doing kind of new and novel things that don't feel like on strategy to me. I've had to learn to shut up and sit there and just listen and not be like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Why are you wasting time on this? Even if it is a waste of time from my perspective, I've realized that the cost of pointing that out and asking that question in that moment is dramatic. It depends on the company. It depends on what you're going on. But like for us, like we have to give some freedom to the team to generate their own ideas and to generate their own novel solutions and things like that. And insisting that it's always your way or insisting that it's tightly coupled to the thing that you've already laid out. I understand the arguments for that from we got to stay focused and no wasted time and all that type of stuff. In practice, when dealing with humans, it's very, very counterproductive,
Yes.
Right? And so it's not great. So as a leadership thing, one of the biggest pieces of advice, when you're dealing with people who are trying to do novel things from a tech debt standpoint, is to be gentle with them, right? Like down to the individual engineer. I mean, maybe this is just obvious, and I'm an unusual person to have to learn this. Maybe everybody kind of naturally learn this, but if somebody is doing it, you don't say this is a waste of time. You don't be critical of it in that respect. The important thing is to then ask questions, bring it. It's the same thing as negotiating with your or your business partners. You negotiate with your own team to get into alignment as well, right? Like maybe somebody's super passionate about, a certain blue-green strategy or something like that, right? And you're still trying to containerize. Maybe you're going from like a VM type of architecture, and this guy or gal is developing this incredibly sophisticated deployment strategy. And it's like, you're like 2 years away from being able to do something like this. Settle down, right? Like that's the type of thing that would go off in my head, right? And I'm just like, yeah, it's a cool idea, but like, we can't do this now, right? Like you have to figure out a way to say that in a productive fashion that's not going to take the wind out of their sails, right?
Yes.
And so, and give them a little bit of freedom, again, without wasting a ton of capacity that isn't going to be able to be leveraged. Because if you do something that then sits on the shelf for 6 months, it's unlikely to get used. When people are passionate about things, you want to try to bias towards leveraging that passion, because a passionate engineer is going to do a lot better work than someone who is assigned a task. So I would say, generally speaking, you want to try to channel it a little better if you can, but then also let them just work it out. Like we've had conversations like this where we'll let the other one just kind of talk it out, even though 10 minutes earlier we'd have realized, yeah, this is a dead end. But instead of telling this person it's a dead end, we're going to let them talk it out and they'll be like, oh yeah, this is a dead end, right? And sometimes that's useful because you don't know what's going to come up in that 10 minutes. Maybe this great idea comes up, but if you're like, no, this is a dead end, let's stop, then you've just killed the flow and who knows, right? So there's a lot of creativity there that this type of conversation is a really easy place for it to get squashed, and I really encourage you not to do that. So.
Yeah. And so asking the questions about things like that is, well, okay, cool. Let's hear you. I want to hear this. You're passionate. I'm passionate. Okay. But now start working through the justification to me. Like, here's what I'm going to ask you. Tell me what you've gone through. Tell me your thought process to justify this spend, this, because it's all spend, it's all dollars. It's money. So, okay, we're going to spend some money on this. How are you justifying this? And sometimes that's enough just to get somebody talking enough and say, yeah, you said it, is that, oh yeah, this isn't valuable. Okay, cool. I've just convinced myself, and then you have no blood on your hands. You haven't done a thing.
They're not upset
questions
with you at all, right? Like they're just happy that you listen to them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, for sure.
And so also one thing we didn't say too is that sometimes with these little crazy harebrained ideas that they don't take a whole lot of time, but there's so much learning out of that. Something new that's a new pattern and a new architecture pattern or a new way of deploying or developing that you wouldn't have learned otherwise. So sometimes, okay, this isn't really aligned. All right, I'm going to trust you a little bit, but this is what I want to know out of this is how is this going to roll to the overall teams? Like, how can you repeat this? If it's something useful, how can we repeat this? How can we bring it to team B, C, and D? And so sometimes that's enough to say, you know what? You're right. This isn't enough. Like, this is just a little scratch. And so then it goes nowhere. But the times that it does, I've had my teams come up with something where they said, okay, well, we want to go over to Postgres for the whole app. Like, hold on a second. Wait, what? And so they put some spike work in it. I heard them out and I asked them the questions and they said, oh yeah, we can't do that. But for this part of the app, we're actually find a lot of value using Postgres because of all this searching and fuzzy matching that it has. And so they were able to replace something very expensive, which was Elasticsearch, with Postgres, which saved not only a lot of people hours, but a lot of costs with running the instance as well. So that small spike that I could have just told them no, actually ended up saving the company thousands of dollars a month because that was a useful nugget that they saved for the implementation somewhere else.
I mean, I think fundamentally what we're saying is you got to be able to tell the story. It's okay to start with a rudimentary budget. That's usually a place to start, especially if you're going to do something sweeping to try to get your tech debt under control. But really what you want to do is really drive it from a proactive nature of like, what do you need to do? And then you got to be able to make the business case. If you can't make the business case for a technical change, probably not necessary. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, the last other point I would make is I'd reinforce again, as the app manager, whoever the most senior person is that's really in the day-to-day of the app, but also working with the business and things like that. It's your job to make these calls and to advocate for these things. And it's not that you're the CEO and can make all the decisions, but you really have to fight for it because like I said, push comes to shove, it's on you. And so if you let the business push you out of it, well, okay. And so I would encourage you not to do that. And then let your team explore new ideas, give them some freedom and time to explore new ideas, but tie it back to an outcome, right? Like you got to ask them those questions, right? Do that Socratic method of just like, okay, but why? Like, so what? Like nicely, but so what? And then we'll be good. But I don't know, what else did we hit?
No, I think you hit it. That's it. There's always got to be value, but what's your definition of value? And that's the question to ask yourself when you're looking at these things.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for the chat. Talk to you soon.
See ya.
Cheers.